good to see everyone out for Bible study this Wednesday night. We've been going through the book of Numbers, and we are finally to the last chapter here in the book of Numbers. And as I said last week, you ought to give yourself a pat on the back because this is not an easy book, really. I mean, it's one of the more difficult books. It's kind of long, and a lot of people, whenever they, sometimes, does anybody do the thing where they try to read through the Bible in a year, or use those reading plans or anything? Have you ever tried that?
Yeah, once when I was younger.
So those reading plans, some of them, they'll take you and start you, and what they do is they move you around. That way, when I read through the Bible, I like to read just straight through, from Genesis in order all the way to Revelation. Some of them will take you, and they'll start you in Matthew, and then the next day it might put you back in the Old Testament, and it'll kind of move you around. By the time you get that thing ticked off at the end of the year, you're done reading through the Bible. I don't necessarily like doing it that way. That's kind of confusing to me, but it's really a preference thing. It's really, the way you want to do it. But my point about that is, if you've ever started out trying to read through the Bible and you did it in order, as I do, with Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, a lot of people, they start out in Genesis, it's going good, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers. It slows down because you get bogged down in Leviticus. There's what people call dry reading. And some of the things in Numbers can be considered dry reading, but I mean, really, it's one of the most interesting books in the Old Testament, if you ask me. I mean, yes, there's the numbering of the people, but that's really a very small part of the book. So that's why I said congratulate yourself. You've made it, we've almost made it through the end. And like I said, the numbering, there's only 2 numberings in the whole book. So, but like I said, the dry part is, if you remember, let me take you back in time to where we first started. When we start out here, he starts naming off all the tribes. They're getting prepared to travel. And then they offer these offerings, right? And every offering is the exact same thing. So when you're reading through there, you're reading each 12 tribes, but you're reading the exact same offering, one after another. And you might be thinking, what's the point? Maybe I should just skip over this if I already know. But, don't skip over it, because when you come to names in the Bible and things that are repetitive, and your mind might be repetitive, that's a good way for you to practice your reading skills, So what I do is whenever I get to these places like this, a lot of people might tend to want to speed up and kind of hurry up and skip through that. But what I do is slow down. When you get to the names, when you get to a lot of repetition, slow down and try to sound that out. And when you do that, it's going to help your reading comprehension skills. Use that look at it as an exercise for your mind. If you feel like it's so dry, I'm not going to get much out of this, I might as well skip it. Well, just think it. You can use it for an exercise for your mind for reading and sounding out. They use this method in schools. It's called the see and say method. I don't know if you guys have heard that, where somebody will look at the word and they just, after so long, they start to recognize it, and that's how they know it. But, you can't do see and say with these names here. You have to, these are not familiar. These names are very odd, and, they're not common names, so you can't use the shortcut of see and say here. So that's a good thing, because the see and say method is fine for some things, but it's not really beneficial. It's not as beneficial as stopping and slowing down and reading through the names and pronouncing those names. So there's a purpose that God put these names in here and these numberings and all the different repetitive things like the offerings and all that. It's there for a reason. So just remember that. But as I said, we've went through this book, and as I said, there's a lot of interesting accounts in here. We're down to the last chapter. Are there any questions or comments up to this point? Yes.
I've seen this whole thing visually. It happening like a movie screen in front of me.
That's good.
And it means more to me now than just dry names and.
I'm glad you said that. That was my purpose in going through this book, because what it's supposed to do when we read the Bible. See, a lot of people, they read through the Bible and they read really fast through things. But the purpose of reading through the Bible is to stop and arrest your attention on the verses, and it's supposed to create an impression in your mind and create a picture in your mind, as you said. So a lot of these events in here are very vivid, aren't they? I mean, the things that happen, you know, like Korah being swallowed up in the earth, that creates a picture in your mind that doesn't leave you. That stays with you. You know, things like that. And the fiery serpents and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of things in the book of Numbers. There's just so many events there. And it's really, it's kind of sad that people kind of tend to skip over it and not think too much about it, because they see the word Numbers and they see that there is some dry reading. But once you get past that first part, that dry stuff, you know, you'll be into the good stuff, the meat. And once you get there, it's good. And you need to get while the getting's good, because there's all kind of good things in here. And, you know, a lot of the things in the New Testament are references to the book of Numbers. You know, a lot of, you know, the brazen serpent, Jesus refers to that. You know, he talks about the fact, as the Son of Man, as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up. You know, he uses that as typical, a symbol of the cross. And so this is an important book. And the wilderness wanderings, that's referred to all through, you know, the book of Hebrews. That's referred to in the book of 1 Corinthians. So, and it's referring maybe to some in Exodus too, but primarily that's the book of Numbers. The 40-year wanderings is in the book of Numbers. So just remember that. And we've made it through this whole book. So, but now we come up to chapter 36, and we see here where do we remember back in chapter, let's see here, I believe it's chapter 27, the daughters of Zelophehad. Do we remember that chapter where they came to Moses and present their supplication, and they're asking, they're asking Moses if they can get an inheritance.
Instead of going over there.
No, see, that was another one.
Oh.
See, there's two events here that I used to get those confused too. There's the daughters of Zelophehad, they present their supplication, and then what you're talking about is Ephraim, Gad, and Manasseh.
Yeah.
So that's good that you said that, because you need to differentiate between those in your mind. So once they get over into the plains of Moab, there's two occurrences here. There's actually three big ones. There's the thing with Balaam and the Moabites. There's the thing with, there's the event with Zelophehad and his daughters. And then there's the event with Ephraim, Gad, and Manasseh. So the one I'm talking about is where these daughters, they didn't have any husbands and they didn't have any male heirs in the family. So they went to Moses and asked, can we have an inheritance in the land? Because we don't have any husbands, and there's no males in the family, and so they asked Moses to give them an inheritance. And God, Moses didn't know prior to this time there had not been a situation like this. And so what Moses did, he goes to the Lord, and the Lord says they speak right. You know, they need to have an inheritance in the land. Their fathers died in the wilderness, and it was not because of anything that they were guilty of. It was in their own sin, as it says, which that could mean that they were probably part of that first generation who went over to send the spies over, and they simply passed off the scene while in that 40 years. But whatever it may have been, God said, yes, they speak right, and to give them portion in the land. So now in chapter 36, you might want to make a note that this is connected to chapter 27. He's going to follow up and show the conclusion of all that. And this is going to come to fruition right here. Now I'll begin reading some verses here in chapter 36. It says, and the chief fathers of the families of the children of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh, of the families of the sons of Joseph, came near and spake before Moses and before the princes of the chief fathers of the children of Israel. And they said, the Lord commanded my Lord to give the land for an inheritance by lot to the children of Israel. And my Lord was commanded by the Lord to give the inheritance of Zelophehad, our brother, unto his daughters. And if they be married to any of the sons of the other tribes of the children of Israel, then shall their inheritance be taken from the inheritance of our fathers, and shall be put to the inheritance of the tribe whereunto they are received. So shall it be taken from the lot of our inheritance. And when the jubilee of the children of Israel shall be, then shall their inheritance be put unto the inheritance of the tribe whereunto they are received. So shall their inheritance be taken away from the inheritance of the tribe of our fathers. So what they're saying here, they see the decision that was made in chapter 27, and they say, there's going to be a problem with this. If the daughters of our tribe, the tribe of Manasseh, go and marry into another tribe, the male of that tribe is going to get the inheritance. And it's not going to solve the problem. Our tribe will eventually die out. And it'll be less in number. It won't be as strong. It'll be weaker. And so what they're saying here, they're presenting this problem to Moses, and we'll see what's going to happen here. Verse 6, it says, "This is the thing which the Lord doth command concerning the daughters of Zelophehad, saying, Let them marry to whom they think best, only to the family of the tribe of their father shall they marry." So he solves the problem right there. He nips it in the bud. He said, the way you take care of this, the daughters from each tribe shall marry in the families of their tribe. And that'll take care of the problem. And he even points out here that if they were to do otherwise and go and marry into these other tribes, even the Feast of Jubilee would not solve it. And the Jubilee, does anybody know what that is?
Land reverts back to its original owners.
Right. It's where people who were in debt, people who owed people money and things like that, they were released from that. If they couldn't pay it over 7 years, they were released, which is a good policy.
Is it 7 years?
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking
Yeah, I believe it was
more than that.
It was 7 years. Maybe
Well, I'm thinking it was like, what, 49?
I think it was 40. Yeah, Jubilee, every 7 years they did something, and then after 7 sevens, that would be Jubilee. You're right.
Yeah.
So my mind's a little foggy on that.
Yeah, the 7th year was the Sabbath year, and after 7 Sabbath years was the Jubilee.
Yeah, and they did something on the 7th year too, didn't they? There was something that they observed.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It was a Sabbath year.
Mm-hmm. So on the Jubilee, they released everybody from their debt and everything like that. And he's saying that in the year of Jubilee, if somebody has to forfeit their inheritance, or if they have to put it up for mortgage or whatever, if they're married into another tribe and it gets released back to them, it's not going to go back to Manasseh. It'll go back to whoever tribe they married into. And so they're seeing the problem that would come up potentially. And Moses goes ahead and goes to the Lord, and he basically solves the problem here. He says, this is how you solve this. They need to marry in their own tribe, and that'll solve the problem. So everybody good on that? I mean, it's pretty simple. I mean, he's basically just referring back to chapter 27 on what he decided, and they've seen a potential problem, and they bring it to Moses. And again, you see him coming to Moses here, and you're thinking, uh-oh. Again, this is the third time, you know.
Repopulate that.
Yeah, I mean, and it was important for the tribes back then to be, you know, we may not look at it so much today like this, but having a lot of offspring, that was important in a tribal setting, in a setting where, such as this, where you know, males, having a lot of sons was a sign of respect, of prestige. We don't really look at it that much today. We look at money and power and all that, but
well, it was the same way for them. When you got old, there was no 401k, there was no Social Security. If you got old and somebody was going to take care of you, it was the next generation of your kids.
the kids were supposed to do what they were supposed to do, which they did that for a while. But you see, on up in Jesus' day, Jesus called the Pharisees on the spot and said, you know, you say to your parents that you're going to help them, then you say it is a gift, it is Corban. You know, this is dedicated to the Lord, and then they go spend it on themselves. So they were supposed to be using money to take care of their parents, but they'd say, oh, that's Corban, that's dedicated to God. But instead they were greedy, and they were grasping for their money and just hoarding that money.
And in a lot of cases, you'll see large families in very agricultural cultures, because more farm hands the better. And then as they got more towards city and trading and mercantile, then you start having the problems of, hey, I want the money, give me the money.
It's like, hey, I thought you were having kids because you thought they were cute and, you know, fun and play with. And I was like, no, we need some help on the farm.
Wouldn't that create a bunch of
I started to ask.
not necessarily.
If
I
that
mean,
tribe settled in Alabama.
when it says to marry in your tribe, it's not talking about your immediate, your brother or sister or something like that. But
We're talking about tribes that you would have had several families that.
Like Graceville, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, you would have had several families that, yeah, they might be interrelated like 300 years ago, but at that point they were like.
right, but once you get past, and I don't want you to misunderstand me here. I don't. He wasn't saying to marry the brother and sister or something like that, but I mean, past the second or third cousin, at this time, they married within their own tribe. They married within their own family, and like I say, he's not saying that close relationship. So,
Well, you had to know your genealogy in Mississippi,
oh yeah,
because, third cousins marrying each other after a while,
My family had that problem.
But there was incestual type situations going on.
yeah. There was in Genesis, I believe it was. What was
Well, in Genesis, you kind of get a pass. I mean, really.
Well, it was still incestuous. It was let's see here. It was the father of Moab and Ammon. Do you know who I'm talking about? I can't think of his name now.
Was it there was some.
Lot. It was Lot. See, Lot, whenever God was going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, what happened was Lot and his two daughters and his wife, they were leaving the city, and God said, "Don't look back. I'm fixing to destroy the city." I'm sorry.
Yeah, and she looked back, so then he had to procreate with his daughters, right?
Right. Here's the thing.
He didn't have
Well,
to.
he did.
They got him drunk, and
Right.
that's what they did.
That,
Right.
I thought I remembered that. I remember the guy got.
So God said, "I'm fixing to destroy it. It's going down. And when you go, you don't look back." And so his wife looked back and became a pillar of salt. And so him and his daughters, they were going to go and dwell in one city. And he asked the Lord, "Can I go dwell in another city? Oh Lord, is it not a little one?" And there's a lot to be said about that. But he goes off into this faraway place. And back then, they are focused on the promised seed. It's an important. The heir, the seed line is very important. It's primary. It's everything. And so they were concerned. They were worried. What's going to happen if our father dies? It's going to stop with us. So they got their father inebriated, and they went and lay with their father. And then we had the people of Moab and Ammon. It came from that incestuous relationship there. And they may have had good intentions because they were concerned about the seed line, but they made haste and they made a decision there, and we see the problems that children of Israel had with Moab and Ammon. So there's always consequences for getting in a hurry and doing things in haste and getting involved in sin. It never pays off. So
Sarah rushed it with Hagar. And
right.
We're still dealing with that.
There's another example where Sarah and Abraham, they were promised a son and they got impatient, didn't they? And so Sarah said, "Why don't you just go and lay with my handmaid?" And so then we had the birth of Ishmael. And as Darlene pointed out, today we still have enmity and turmoil over in the Middle East because of that those events back there. It all stems back to the seed of Abraham and the seed of Ishmael. And they still have turmoil going on in that country today because of that. Yeah, we still see the results of all the. That's one of the.
It goes all the way back to.
It goes all the way back, all the way back almost to the beginning of time.
Yeah, most of your Islamic people trace their heritage back to Ishmael.
Right. The people we would call the Arab nations today, they come from Ishmael, and then you have the Israelites in Palestine, and so there's enmity that builds between them because they fight over who gets the land. They put all this emphasis.
The same thing that they're bringing up to Moses about these daughters, saying, "Hey, they're going to marry outside and they're going to take the land." They're still worried about who owns and controls that land.
See, they misunderstood the whole purpose of the land, didn't they? God, His ultimate purpose was never the land. They misinterpreted the whole purpose. They missed the whole point. God was using the land as a means as an instrument to bring the nation into the world and bring the seed through that nation. That was it. And when He was done with that, He was through with the land.
Well, there was one other purpose. He was basically telling them, I'm going to give you a place to worship me where you're not going to have to worry about the government coming in and saying, that's not our state religion. You're supposed to be worshiping this. He said, I'm going to give you a place where you are free to worship, as we say in our prayers here, without outside intervention. And you're going to be free to worship me in spirit and in truth. And they took those blessings and they spit on it.
And
And they corrupted the religion.
what's interesting is when God told Abraham, I'll bless them that bless them and curse them that curse thee, that was not just to Abraham, that was to him and his seed forever. So anytime the nation of Israel were doing right, they didn't have to worry about enemies. The enemies knew, you do not mess with these people. And if they tried it, if they tried to test the waters, they always got destroyed. And as long as Israel was being faithful. Now when they started trying to be like these other nations, then they couldn't win their battles. And they wouldn't always lose completely, but they wouldn't be able to do as well. They were getting by the skin of their teeth. And it's like, God was trying to wake them up and get them to say, what's the problem here? Why are we not winning anymore? And so when they would finally get to that point, and you see in the book of Judges, they'd cry to God and say, please, Lord, help us. And they'd raise a judge up. And they'd be faithful for a while. Then they'd start getting back into idolatry. Then they go through the whole process again. Sin just bogs down progress. It always does. If we've learned anything from the book of Numbers, we've learned that sin always does that. So, but then we see here carrying on here in chapter 36, it says in verse 8, and every daughter that possesseth an inheritance in any tribe of the children of Israel shall be wife unto one of the family of the tribe of her father, that the children of Israel may enjoy every man the inheritance of his fathers. Neither shall the inheritance remove from one tribe to another tribe, but every one of the tribes of the children of Israel shall keep himself to his own inheritance, even as the Lord commanded Moses. So did the daughters of Zelophehad, for Mahlah, Tirzah, Hoglah, and Milcah, and Noah, and the daughters of Zelophehad were married unto their father's brother's sons. And that's, that is a cousin. But as I said, we're early on in humanity here, and this is what the word says. I don't really have any much more to say than that.
I'm sure the Lord had some intervention to make sure nothing happened, because
Well,
he did tell him to procreate.
all the way up to medieval times, you had cousins, and it's still prevalent in Arab nations today for the exact same reasons that they want to keep money and wealth and inheritance within a expanded family. So the cousin thing it's worldwide, and it's still today. Here in the United States, it's illegal only out to like second cousins. Past that, it's...
There's another way you could look at it. When it says, see what verse was that? Married to their father's brothers. Sometimes the word brother in the Old Testament or the Bible is not used specifically of the direct brother. So it could be further removed.
I think
That,
mine says uncle's sons, which would be their
So yours
cousins.
just nips it in the bud and says it's the, it's just,
Cousins.
what version is that?
New American Standard.
New American Standard? Okay. So the NASB says, as they call it, the NASB, the New American Standard Version, says that it's the uncle there. But
The uncle's sons.
uncle's son,
Which would be their
which would be
cousins.
cousin, But so we see here that he's going to have them marry in their tribe. Verse 12, it says, they were married into the families of the son of Manasseh, the son of Joseph, and their inheritance remained in the tribe of the family of their father. These are the commandments and the judgments which the Lord commanded by the hand of Moses unto the children of Israel in the plains of Moab near Jericho. And we're done. We have finished with the book of Numbers. So
Wish we had a map.
I tried to show you a map. I know my art skills aren't the best, but when you're studying this book, you need to break a map out sometimes, because these names is not going to mean anything to you because you don't know. It's like if we look at read something about the states in the United States. Of course, we know what it's talking about because we know we've grown up in school in geography looking at a map of the United States.
Don't
But
be
if
so
we don't.
hasty.
Yeah.
There are kids in this modern generation that have zero knowledge of geography. I was arguing with a young man at work who thought Nashville was right over there in West Tennessee.
Yeah, it's north of. It's actually north. So Middle Tennessee is where it would be.
Yeah. Smack down in the middle of Tennessee. He thought, oh, that's West Tennessee. No.
West Tennessee would be more Memphis than there.
Yeah, it's Memphis.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, here we go. Here's a map.
May not be the best, but
But like I said, like when you're reading through, if you're reading these names of these places and you don't know the map, you're going to be, it's not going to mean anything to you besides, you can still get something out of it, but, you know, it won't mean as much to you there. So, and of course, there's Memphis, Tennessee right there. No, I'm just kidding. But,
Well, it is on a river.
Tennessee River, Black Sea.
So, but that brings us to the end of the book of Numbers. And I think it'd be best, instead of going and moving into Deuteronomy right now, we'll just wait. Is everybody okay with saving that for Sunday? That way I can, we can start out fresh and do an introduction. And we're not going to go in Deuteronomy. I think I've decided I'm not going to spend as much time in each chapter. It'll be fairly quickly because we've already set the stage. We've already studied Leviticus and Numbers. We've set the stage for Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy, the word Deuteronomy, it means in Greek, deutero means two or double, and onomy means law. It's a repetition, a commentary on the law that's already been given. So he's going back over everything that we've already studied, and he's going to show details and things of why they messed up, and give additional information and to help us hone in on just exactly why they did the things they did, why they failed, and why they, when they did do right, what was it that made them do right? You know, it was their love for God. And actually, the last verse here, Numbers 36, it's important. When it says that this is what Moses did in the plains of Moab, the whole entire book of Deuteronomy is going to take place in the same place. In the plains of Moab. They're still not going into the land yet. It's not till we get to Joshua that they're going to cross over. We're going to see in Joshua, you'll see in Joshua, I know this is way far ahead, but that's when they actually cross through the Jordan. They got the ark. It's a cool, it's really a great scene there where they take the ark and the priest walk through and God stops the stream miraculously and they walk through on dry ground, which is symbolic of them going through the Red Sea. And they're carrying the ark, and you've got the tribe of Levi there. You've got this space in between each tribe. You know, I'm sure that the people in the land of Canaan were like, you know, shaking in their boots.
Well, yeah, you can see Rahab.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was like, yeah, we've heard you're coming, and everybody's terrified.
But you know what? Rahab had the right attitude. If other people would have been like Rahab, they could have been saved just like Rahab. Rahab was saved. Rahab is mentioned with a man named Abraham, a big all-star of the Old Testament. She's mentioned with him right alongside of him in James chapter 2.
wasn't she in the lineage of Christ?
She's in the lineage of Christ. There's actually 4 women in the genealogy of Jesus in Matthew chapter 1. You've got Rahab, who was a Gentile. You've got Bathsheba, who was, they don't think she was an Israelite. It's kind of hard to tell where she came from, but you got Bathsheba. You have Ruth.
I think Bathsheba was an Israelite.
She may have been. They're not sure of her ancestry. It's
She
hard
was
to
just
tell.
about had to have been because she was married to a Hittite.
And then you've got Tamar. So you've got some. That's in there by divine intent to show you that redemption is for people who were marred. It's not for perfect people. All these women that are in there, they're either Gentiles or there's a harlot. You know, Tamar was guilty of incest, as we talked about a while ago. It's not always a pretty picture we see of humanity that God is dealing with. And he put that in there to help you see, I don't expect you to be perfect. That's not what this is all about. I expect you to come with all your baggage, all of it, bring it on. And I'm here to help you. I'll work with you. And if you hold in my hand in faith, everything will be fine. And so that's what it's there for, to show us that that's what the Bible is for. So I think this is a good place to stop tonight. We finished the book of Numbers, so just remember, congratulate yourself, and I congratulate you. We've done good, and we've taken our time, and I've gotten a lot out of this study. I hope you guys have in this book of Numbers, and we'll pick up next week, or on Sunday, Lord willing, in the book of Deuteronomy. we'll go ahead and move into our invitation portion for tonight. For tonight, I want to look at a couple of verses in Matthew chapter 5. Now, in Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7, we have the greatest sermon that has ever been preached by the greatest preacher who has ever lived, and that is Jesus. He preaches this Sermon on the Mount, and he's showing the people there what the law was all about, the real spiritual undergirdings of the law, what it all really was pointing to, where they had misunderstood a lot of things, and they had not understood, misinterpreted things, and they thought that God's, his end-all be-all was the law. They thought as long as we go through these ceremonies and keep this law, then God owes us salvation, which is pretty, arrogant, to be frank. But just to be blunt. But the thing about it is, Jesus is trying to show them what the law was really pointing to. You see this phrase throughout the Sermon on the Mount. Ye have heard that it was said, but I say unto you. He shows you this is where you've messed up and misinterpreted that. But here's what the law really means. Where he says, for ye have heard that it hath been said by them of all time, thou shalt hate thine enemy. Jesus said that's not the intent of that passage, and he shows how we're supposed to love our enemies and do good to our enemies. So this is indeed a great sermon. Now listen to what he says, beginning in chapter 5. It says, seeing the multitudes, he went up into a mountain, and when he was set, his disciples came unto him. So we see here the multitudes are gathered. There's no telling how many people that are gathered around here at the sea. But he says this is to his disciples. So he's speaking to the people who are ready to be in the kingdom. They're entering into the kingdom. So these are principles and precepts for us as we're in the kingdom. We need to have these in our life. Verse 2, it says, he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And I just want to focus in on this one beatitude right here. Now, what does he mean by poor in spirit? Does he mean that you're on the lowest scale of the economical scale there? No, he's talking about the fact of being destitute of spirit, being humble, being lowly, and realizing that you have nothing to recommend yourself to God. There's nothing in and of yourself that you can show God, or any accomplishment you've done aside from his grace and the gospel of Christ to save you. There's nothing you can do. And so he shows the importance of doing that, of being poor in spirit and realizing that you must see yourself in this light. So just remember, whenever we're thinking about God's grace and the gospel of Christ, if it was not for his grace and the provisions in his word, there's nothing we could do. There's no way that we could save ourselves. And God has offered this through the gospel of Christ. And as long as we see ourselves as we really are, and that's really what this beatitude means. It means to see yourself standing in the light of God's holiness. John says in the book of 1 John, chapter 1, verse 5, that God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. That simply means that God is not versed in evil. He's not versed in sin. He's never experienced evil. And so therefore, we see in our lives, we see that we have sin. Romans 3:23, for all have sinned and come short of God's glory. And so when we realize that, we realize that there is a barrier here. There's a barrier between us and God, because God, he's holy. He is sinless. He's not versed in sin. And when we realize that, we understand there's something that I am lacking here. There's something that I need. And what you need is grace. You need mercy. You need pardon. And that's where the gospel comes in. If you're here tonight and you're not a Christian, you can partake of that grace by taking simple steps of the plan of salvation by repentance, confession, and baptism. This is God's simple plan of salvation for you. If you're outside of his good graces, to be brought into fellowship with him, to be in the safety of the church. If you're a Christian and you strayed off the narrow path, you can be brought back into the fold by repentance, confession, and prayer. Whatever your need is, we're here for you. Please come as together we stand and sing.